This is But the Years Are Short, the podcast where mamas who are therapists share real advice for real families. I'm Meagan.
And I'm Katie, and we want to be your front porch community where you can laugh and learn with us about the beautiful, messy, overwhelming, hilarious work of raising kids.
Because the days are long,
but the years are short.
Okay. Hi, friend.
Hi.
All right. We are just on a roll of talking about hard things. So what we're going to talk about now, we're going to talk about how do we help our kids understand death and grief?
Yeah, it's so important.
It's so important. And I think it's like really, it's a very challenging conversation. I think for a couple things, is one, often parents are worried that they're going to say the wrong thing.
Yep.
And that it's going to scare their kids more than help their kids. That's what I hear a lot.
Yeah.
So we're here to help today. And we're going to start with like just talking about why do you think these conversations are so important for our kiddos? And yeah, I'll just start there. Why do you think these are so important, Katie?
Because I think kids well, first of all, they make up their own stories, right?
Yes.
And they don't know what's happening and they feel alone. If they feel like they can't talk to you about something. And so if they're making up their own information and they can't talk to you about it, this is not a great situation for them because often the stories that they make up they're almost never correct, right? And
yes,
they often are like self-centric because kids are egocentric, and so
all about them.
yeah, it's all about them. And so we want to help them make sense of what is happening around them and be able to come to you with concerns or confusion or big feelings so they're not dealing with that all by themselves.
Yeah. So I think the things that you're saying is that one, kids are going to make up their own story, right? So we want to help teach them appropriate things. So we want to build safety
Mhm.
in what is actually true. We want to build trust. We want them to be able to come to us. We want them to know the bigger picture. So we're developing trust when we talk about it openly. And we're teaching our kids emotional language when we're talking about it openly. We're teaching them like how do we talk about it? What are the things associated with it? Which I think are really all super helpful for our kiddos and everything. Okay, so I think one of the big things I hear from parents often is whether it be clients or friends, is that when kids become like first or second grade, will hear people call me like, okay, like they're talking about death all the time. What is going on? Is something wrong? Right. And so I think like I want to help normalize a big piece of this of like what should we be expecting from our kids developmentally in different ways, right? When we talk about death and things like that. And so just bear with me, Katie. Like, so the reason that our kids at first, second grade start really understanding death and have a lot of questions about it is because their brains are developing and they actually understand the permanence of death for the first time.
Mhm.
So when we talk about 6, 7, 8, that's when this is happening and they're understanding it more, right? So they understand like death means that we're not going to see them again. Death is a permanent thing. And
Yeah.
so I think that that is a really important piece that we all have just to recognize, like developmentally, it's appropriate. Um, y- you can't watch a Disney movie without someone dying,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
feel
You're
like,
totally right.
right? And so I think the other thing is like, yeah, they've seen Moana 100 times. They've seen Frozen 100 times. They've seen Lion King a million times. But when we get to that 6, 7, 8, like they are understanding the bigger storyline. They're understanding that Mufasa is not coming back. Like he lives in the clouds, right? So then what does that mean for me and my mom and my dad and all the pieces? And I
Mm.
think that we just have to recognize like that is developmentally appropriate. And we want to help support your kids through those conversations.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so
Yeah. So, what
good.
would you add, Katie?
I don't know. I think you're just so genius. We had right at that age range, right at that age range, we had a dog
Hmm.
that we um had to like put to sleep And it was very sad. And the girls talked about it for 100 years. Uh,
Yeah.
because and said the same things 1,000 times, right? Like just on repeat. But they were like 6 and 7. It is so it's just funny. Like it happens exactly like that. And I think it is like it's a little I was glad at the time that I had a degree in it so that I knew that it was coming and knew how to navigate all that. And even though I did, it was still a little disconcerting, like a little bit like I don't we're still
It
talking.
can be overwhelming.
Yeah, and sort of fatiguing, right? You're like, I
Yes.
want to keep talking about this dog for the love of Pete. Like I don't it's been 6 months and we're still praying for the dead dog that she's having fun in.
Yes. Mhm.
So, yeah, I think that's probably the thing that I would add is like while they're going through that shift cognitively, it's also like it's a lot for parents to like navigate because it's a topic that we don't talk about a lot in society, right?
Yes, our culture does not embrace the idea of death, and we don't have, like, good stories about it. I know that I've been to, countries in Africa and Asia, and they have story about death, right? And not like I mean, yeah, there's some pieces that are scary, but like it's talked about in their culture constantly, all the time. It's not a new subject. I know when I went to Malawi, I was in college, and I remember like their being in the culture and like them talking about it and being like, what is going on here? Like just because it felt really overwhelming to me because we not only did I not talk about death while growing up, I didn't have a lot of death in my life. Like,
Yeah.
I had a dog for 17 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just being honest. Like, so, like, and all my grandparents were alive until I had a child. Like, so, like,
Great.
I just had been, was not surrounded by it. And I think that as a culture, a lot of us aren't surrounded by it in some ways. And so
Yeah.
it is hard to talk about, right? It's hard to create those stories around. Even in the Disney movies, often, like, Frozen. We watch Frozen on repeat a lot in my childhood. But like the parents die in this like 30-second clip and then it's over, right? And
Yeah.
then we don't really
Well
talk
done.
about them. All done, right? And so I think one of the most powerful things we can do for our kids is give them a story around death.
Right.
Give them an understanding of what it means.
Yeah.
And so I know that that can be hard. I mean, I think it's hard in our culture because we don't talk about it. And it means that you have to, like, develop that what that means. I think there's a lot of religions obviously have spiritual practices have meaning in death, and they have that, and I think those are great ways you can be rooted for your kiddos and your family. But I think also, like, what does the story mean for you and your family? Because that is important. We all want to understand the pieces of it, and so being super intentional and understanding and creating that story can be really helpful. What do you think, Katie?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think we explain to parents all the time that like kids learn things in stories, they understand things in stories. And so it's important for us to give our kids clear story about big important things. So I'm like interested to see what your framework is around this, like what your thought process is.
Yeah. Okay. So I think one, I want to totally normalize. Like, yes, our kids are going to talk about it a lot, right? They're going to ask questions within that 6 and 8 range. Typically, we see a ton thing out. Whether they have a direct experience with it, that's going to be connected to when the puppy dog died, right? When the thing, and so we're going to have lots of questions around it because, like Katie said, there's egocentric. Like, it all matters about what's going to happen to them next.
Hmm.
And so, one, I want us to help create normalizing death. Yep, people died, things happen, and kids are looking for that safety and that security in that. And so, one, I want us to help develop like, okay, what is the story within our family about what does death mean? Right?
Yeah.
How do we talk about that? Whether it be a spiritual connection and whether it be like Mufasa lives in the clouds. That is okay. Like, we can use the stories that exist and the things that we have and kind of like connect it to our world. Whatever makes sense for you, you're going to be able to tell genuinely. And that's what our kids want is a genuine understanding of it.
Yeah.
And so I think, how do you help develop that story? And so the questions I ask for yourself are like, what do I believe about death? What comforts me in the understanding of it? And how do I tell my kids about that?
Yeah.
And so, like, those can be some really good guiding questions for it to help.
Mhm.
Yeah. What would you add, Katie? What do you think about that?
I think a thing that is an interesting dynamic that I didn't really consider until I had kids is that because families have different stories about it, different beliefs, your kids are going to come home and be like, well, so and so's mom says this, or
Hmm.
this grown up told me this other thing, and it's wildly different than what you believe or what you are hoping your kids will believe, right? And so pretty solid way to handle that is just to say, yeah, people believe different things, and this is what I believe, or this is what we believe, or this is what daddy and I believe, or mommy and I believe. And I think that that allows tolerance for other people and like a pretty clear delineation between like other families are allowed to have other beliefs and this is what we believe.
Yeah.
So it kind of clarifies for them.
And help shape that, right? And that's okay. I think being prepared for those questions can be really helpful too
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
that. Okay, so once you've kind of like developed like what you believe about death, here's the thing that often throws a lot of parents off is when our kids get overwhelmed about us as parents dying, right? And so I
Yeah.
think like, okay, how do we help our kids with that? What do you think, Katie?
Like when they start to get worried that you're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whether it's founded or unfounded.
Yes. I think it's harder when it's unfounded. What
Hmm.
do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think because it's like you can't be like, "Ugh, I'm not going to die. That's a lie, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or even to be able to just say, like, I'm going to be here. Like, I'm going to be with you when you get married. I'm going to be with you when you have kids. Like, we hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a thing you can promise.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like being able to be present and say, just notice the feelings that they're having, right? Like, oh, feeling so worried. You don't want me to go anywhere. Well, I am perfectly healthy. And do you want to come over here and have a hug? Do you want some snuggles? Um, Tell me what's making you feel worried.
Yes.
Right. So, like shifting it into curiosity rather than immediately trying to fix the discomfort or the fear. I don't know what it,
No, I completely agree. And I think that's the hard thing for us as parents, right? Because we want to, especially when it's like death, right? When if we're not comfortable with that topic, right? We want to like problem solve and solve all the problems of it and be like, this is not going to happen. So I don't want to worry about it until I'm really old and you're grown and all the things, right? And there's a piece that we have to hold that gray for our kids.
yep.
And so it is, I think that piece of like, okay, I see you are so scared. I see you are so sad. Like, let's talk about why we are scared and why we are sad. Free that, even having that conversation of like labeling our kids' feelings and holding that space
Hmm.
creates so much freedom and so much safety, that's what we're looking for, right? When I say freedom, I mean safety. Like that creates safety. And we don't have all the answers around this topic too, right? I think that's the hard part for a lot of us too, is that we don't know. We don't know when we're the day we're gonna die. We don't know what the world looks like after that. We have an
No.
idea, we have a story we've created. But I think recognizing that can be super helpful and powerful
Hmm.
of just helping our kids hold that space.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree. So if we are talking to our kids kind of at different ages, what
Mhm.
language do we use at different ages to make it more manageable for them?
Okay, I think that's I love that question. Okay, so our kids are going to notice things all the time, right? And so if we're starting like at 2 to 5 thinking that age, we want to do really concrete language, right? So they're not hearing anymore, death means whatever. They're just being really direct as possible, super concrete can be helpful. They see death as temporary, right? So I think thinking of Coco, right? So the idea of like that Miguel goes and he comes back. Like I'm using a lot of movies, but I do. That's why
Yeah.
our kids understand death, right? So I think that they see it as this magical thing that is thing because often our stories need it. And they just need really simple and clear language around it, right? And so connecting those pieces would be helpful. So then as we
Yeah.
talk about that school age, like we talked about, they understand that permanence, they're going to worry about it more, they're going to ask more detailed questions. And so that's why it's really helpful to have your story about what is death? What does it mean for our family? And then answering the best you can within that. I think being honest, we can all say like death means that your body doesn't work anymore. And we can
Yeah.
all, that can always be a very clear,
Yeah.
concrete
And it's fact.
answer. It's fact, right? When death happens, our body doesn't work anymore.
Right.
What that means for everything else, and you get to decide that and just fill that in within your
Mm-hmm.
context and your family's values. But I
Yeah.
think being really direct is helpful. Things that I don't think are super helpful for kids are the idea of like they went to sleep. Like
Hmm.
that's scary, right? Because we make them go to sleep every night, right?
Right.
And so to think death could just happen in sleep feels scary, right? We lost them. It's helpful. One that I think is really hard for that often parents, I hear not parents, but like family systems tell kiddos that I think can be really challenging is like God needed them or God needed another angel. And the reason for that is one, it can create anger. And
Yeah.
if that is an important system within your family values, we don't want to create that anger or that dissonance within our kiddos. And so
So
I think,
so anger at God.
yes,
Right. Right. Because God took
mhm,
my mom. God
God
took
took them.
God
Yeah.
took grandma.
Grandpa
Yeah.
took my
Right.
dog.
Mm-hmm.
Did he know that I needed him more? I think that's the thing that we hear a
Right.
lot,
Exactly.
which is true, right? And so I think I would avoid those ones for sure. Okay. So then if we jump up to our teens and tweens and older kids, they understand the finality of it. They also understand that there's this idea that like we're not supposed to grieve death or there's only a short period that we're allowed to grieve death. So you'll often see different behaviors, you'll see shutting down, and you may see them hide that grief. And so I do think that's helpful just for us to recognize about that for the piece. So I think one of the things I often hear from families is like you said, Katie, is like we're praying for the dead dog for 6 months. Like,
Mm-hmm.
when is it going to be enough? Like, when is it scary how big my kids' thoughts are around this? I'm a therapist, and we're there with like, I never want this place to be I want this place to be a great resource. I think Katie and I both agree. We want this place to be a great resource for families, but I don't want this to be like, Megan said we're fine. Like, right? Because like, we don't know your kiddos. And so I think like if you are practicing your script, if you are holding their emotions, if you are reflecting their emotions, and we don't see a decrease in intensity or duration, then I would reach out to a mental health professional and
Yeah.
talk to them because we what we know is like if we can help hold our kids' emotions, if we can embrace them, we typically see that anxiety associated with it decrease. And if it doesn't, that's okay. You just need some really specific tools for your kid and your family.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I agree. And so you mentioned, frequency and intensity decreasing over time, and that's a good sign. So frequency and intensity of what?
Great. Of our questions, of our consuming thoughts of it, of the anxiety around it.
Okay. What about like crying
Mhm.
spells?
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Right.
Hmm.
I am having such a hard day at school. Teachers calling because we're crying all day.
Hmm.
Like on the front end of a big loss or big grief, that's really normal, but we want it to decrease over time. And so I think a thing to know might be that grief isn't just about death, right? Like,
No. We've specifically talked about death, but yeah.
yeah, but it can also be like divorce, right? Or like somebody in a family getting a great big illness that really shifts their lifestyle. Any other big changes, right? Like really big moves that take them out of their community or a giant change in the family structure. Like somebody gets a job where they're traveling a lot and they haven't before. So it like
Yes.
really changes the way that things are functioning. All of those are pretty typical reasons for a kiddo to have some shifts in behavior that also have big emotional swings. So
Yeah.
really, that's all okay. What you're looking for is a decrease over time.
Yes. Yeah. So I think we spent lots of time talking about like how do we talk about grief about death, but I think grief is a huge piece of this when we've experienced like any of those things or the death. And so I think when Katie, when you talk to parents or kids about what is grief, what do you say? How do you explain it? One of the things that I tell kids is we use the word they often, when I have kids who've come into my office who've had specifically deaths, we use the word grief around deaths a lot. They've heard the word, right? They know the word. And so, but they don't necessarily have a good understanding of what it is. And so one of the things that I tell kids is grief is that big bag of emotions that hurt really bad when you think about your person.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, and I think we have to recognize that grief specifically when and this happens with all the things. Like so that list that you talked about, Katie, like grief happens with all of those. And it is the bag of it's the joy of having the memory of being the one big family, right? With the sadness of couple, like it's not gonna happen again, right? It's the knowing that your birthday is coming up and your person isn't gonna be there because they're not here anymore, right? Because they are gone and holding those 2 emotions, right? So excited about your birthday and so angry and sad and disappointed that that person's not gonna be there. It's that
Yeah.
huge bag of emotions, and it comes in waves, and I think that's the hardest thing about grief, is that we don't know when it's gonna hit often or
Yeah.
how big it's gonna hit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
We talk a lot in my house, frankly. I mean, I have preteen girls who have lots of big feelings a lot of the time, frankly. So
Yes.
we talk a lot about how big feelings come in waves.
Mhm.
And we have to figure out how to like withstand them or let them wash over us and then recede. Um, and so, how do we do that without getting completely knocked over?
Yes.
Or how do we like hold them or cry through them or get a hug or, take care of ourselves on a regular basis so that they aren't so devastating. But I think generally speaking, right, this like package of feelings around it is really helpful because it applies to all the different situations, right? So if it's
Yeah.
a great big giant move, right? It can be exciting to be in a new place, to make new friends, and we can really miss the ones that we had.
Mhm.
So, all right. So thinking about like ways to support them, you know, when our kids are experiencing grief, what thoughts do you have?
I think the thing about grief is that grief typically hits a whole family, right? So I'm gonna be super honest. We had a year where my brother-in-law died of pancreatic cancer, and on the day after his memorial, we found out my sister-in-law had cancer, all in one family, right?
Oh my gosh.
And I had an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 7-year-old, right? My kids are that age, and so I think the thing that is the hardest about grief is often it's not our kids grieving by themselves, right?
Exactly.
The whole family system is often grieving.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I want to say is like, you are going to have your process in that.
Hmm.
And that, and you, in helping your kids process theirs is important, but they're going to be simultaneous, these processes. They're not going to be independent of each other. And so I would say, like, one of the things that we can always do is recognize our kids' feelings in it, right? We can
Yeah.
normalize those feelings. And so, I mean, there were times when, and this was all like right after COVID, y'all, like the world was still a mess. And so, I mean, there were times where we were home doing our school assignment, and my kid would look up and ask me a question about death, ask me a question about their uncle.
Yeah.
And through tears, I would have to say, I know you're really curious. I know you're really sad because I was very curious, right? There's so many questions when it comes to those things. And I was very sad. And I'd say, and I don't know the answer, babe. I know our story. And I would tell our story, right? What we believe about death and grief.
Yeah.
And so I think the things that can be important is holding your routine as much as possible for yourself and your kids, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing like my job is to connect with my kids, not fix it. And to recognize and hold communication as much as possible, understanding their questions and fielding them as best as possible, and giving them a little bit of break in yourself. And so, like, I'll say, all five of my family members, we all process that lots of different ways with lots of different big emotions and ways. And it was like a lot of, like, yeah, we are so angry. We are so sad. What can we do to fix that? What can we do to help with this big emotion? We're not going to
Mhm.
fix the situation. We can't make our uncle come back. We can't make our aunt not have cancer. But what can we do to help? Right. And so recognizing like what can we do in this moment to help is okay and is enough, I think, a lot of the times.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I don't
agree.
know. What would you add to that, Katie?
I mean, I think just lots of like letting them know your feelings make sense, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
of course you feel that way. Whether it's
Mm-hmm.
sad, confused, angry, yeah, of course you feel that way. And I think also like really making sure you're taking care of yourself
Yes.
because supporting somebody else's grief while you're in the middle of it is incredibly challenging.
Yeah,
It's incredibly challenging and depleting.
it is. And I think like being honest and not like being letting our kids see the sad is helpful, right? Like they need to see my sad and know that they can't fix it and it's not their job to fix it as much as I can help them see their sad and know that I can't fix it and it's not my job to fix it.
Mhm.
I think that's important is like how do we do that?
So
And our kids have to see that.
yeah, I think so. Both of my kids at various times have done a thing or two to like, and beyond just like, can I bring you some water? Because you have a headache or something like that. But like, have actively tried to make me feel better, as in like not sad or
Yeah.
not lonely. And not because I'm like wandering around the house like, I'm so lonely. That's not happening.
Yeah.
So, for example, right, like early after their dad and I separated, one of my kids would call me often. And I finally was like, babe, you are calling all the time. What is happening? And she's like, I'm making sure you're not lonely. And so let's keep in mind what's happening there contextually. I am,
Mhm.
she is grieving and her dad is grieving, right? And she is trying to put herself in charge of making sure that I am not lonely.
That you are okay.
Right, which is very sweet, but also not her job. And I don't want her
Too
to go
much.
into the world as a grown up feeling like everyone else's feelings are her job to manage. And so I very quickly and clearly said, honey, my feelings are my job. It is not your job to make sure I'm not lonely. I am just fine. I love you so, so much. Go have fun with daddy, and I will see you in a few days. We're all good.
Mhm.
And so, and I could tell that was very freeing for her because she stopped calling all the time, which I think is good.
Yes. It is.
Allowed her to settle. And so I feel very strongly that we can't make our feelings our kids' job. So while it is our job to support our kids in their grief, unless you have an adult child, it is not their job to support you in your grief.
Yes,
Okay.
100%. And that can be hard, right? And so I think, like you said, Katie, we have to be able to take a pause and say, why is my kid doing all this?
Mhm.
Whether it be because they are like losing their mind and destroying their world, right? Or they are trying to fix us. We have to take a pause and sit back and like set the appropriate boundaries for our kiddos
Yeah.
because we're all grieving. But grief can be safe, right? We can still do it safely. We can still do it kindly. We
Yeah,
can still do it well.
absolutely. And I think, you know, one more thing is to know that these conversations are not a one and done, right? Like conversations about death,
Mm, uh-uh.
like conversations about really anything. The conversation about we're getting divorced, a conversation about we're moving away from your friends, you're switching schools, like anything like that. Those are not one and done conversations. They're like ongoing, the beginning of a number of conversations. And so you just have to be ready for that.
Yeah, because I'm like, I think the thing we often forget, but like as parents who have fully developed brains, like we have that conversation with ourselves 100 times. We have
It's
that
true.
conversation with friends 100 times. And so, like, we want to be the safe place for our kids. We're the ones that the kids think have all the answers. And it doesn't mean we do, but like for why we're moving or why that happened. Yeah, often we do. Right. And so just remembering, like, we tell ourselves that story 100 times, we're gonna have to tell our kids that story 100 times, and that's okay.
That's such a good reminder. That's such a
Mhm.
good reminder because often I'm like, God, I just decided the one time and then we're moving forward and I don't have to talk to somebody 47 times. But in reality, I talked to you about things about 17 times.
Yeah. Yes, 100%.
Mhm.
100%. And that's good. That's normal. That's good. We're supposed to do those things. And I think helping. Okay, so I want to give us some like scripts or some tapes, right, that we can use
Let's
for
do
our
it.
kids because I do think we can get really exhausted. And so I think three really helpful ones, which we've kind of said in different ways, but I just want to like summarize up is when we're acknowledging their feelings, is we're saying, just calling them out and saying, yeah, that makes sense. Your feelings make sense. You're having lots of feelings right now. We want to have lots of tapes around that to be really helpful.
Love
It's
it.
okay to ask the same question again.
Mhm.
I think that gives our kids lots of permission. It's okay. They may hear the same tape from us again, and that is okay for us to say the same thing again with
Yes.
the same question, right? That's okay. I don't have all the answers, but we can talk about it together. We don't have the answers, but being open to that conversation can be really helpful for us and our
Yeah.
kiddos. Again, we want to know that these are conversations that are going to happen again and again and again, and that's okay. We want to continue to check in on our kids, help them, and we want to follow their lead. I will say I have three different kiddos, and they are all very different. I had one who wanted to ask all the questions all the time and talk about it for hours. I had another one who didn't want to know anything and would literally get up and leave when anyone
Yep.
had the conversation,
Mhm.
right? And then I had one in the middle where he definitely wasn't going to ask the question, but the moment someone did, he was all in it, wanted to hear everything and was going to ask follow-ups.
Yep.
They're all going to respond differently. I think it's important to check in on them and to follow their lead to an extent, right? And
Yes.
so it's okay.
I love it.
So, anything else you'd add, Katie, for today?
I guess just like a word of encouragement around like talking about death is not going to hurt your kids.
Mhm.
It's going to support them and just take it as an opportunity to connect and pay attention. If they're really, really uncomfortable, slow it down. And I wouldn't bring it up 1,000 times, right? Like follow
Yeah.
their lead in that regard. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, I think the last piece I'm going to say about when we talk about grief and death is it's the connections that help us heal, not the perfect language, not the perfect toy, not the perfect
it's true.
moment. It's the connections. And that takes lots of time.
Yeah, love it.
All right. Well, thank y'all. Here's today, hoping that you have lots of fun snow pictures and lots of warm cuddles. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Our music is by Stephen Bedall. If you're loving these conversations, we'd be so grateful if you followed the podcast, left a review, or shared this episode with a friend. That's how we grow this little front porch community. And remember, the days are long,
But the years are short. While we often talk about mental health, this should not be used as a substitute for mental health treatment. If you or your child are struggling, please reach out to a local provider.